Alright, so now we're going to cover loops. Now, a loop is simply doing something repeatedly until a condition is met to stop doing it repeatedly. And yes, that was probably a very vague description of it, but I'll show you what it means. We'll just go def a method here again because I can't be bothered naming it something relevant. And now this is a keyword, and just type in while. Now in brackets, go here. In brackets, what you do is you can satisfy a condition that equals true. So in this case, I can go up here and I can go local equals 50. Alright, and while local is less than 100, do a while loop. And this is what we can do in the while loop. We can go message box underscore p. We can go local number. And then we can go local plus equals 1. End. Alright, and this is what we're going to do once we get into this method. It's going to initialize a local variable as 50 here, and then while local is less than 100, do this repeatedly, and then we're gonna keep adding on to local. So it's going to be 51, the 52, the 53, and so on, and so on, and so on until local is 100, and then we'll print out of it, and then we'll get out of the while loop. Okay, so we'll play it, and we should see that message box about 50 times. 50, 51, 2, and we'll just go on until it's done. And that is exactly what a while loop does. It just does something repeatedly until you have a condition telling it not to do it anymore. Alright, so that's what a while loop does on its own, and you can use operator booleans as much as you want. So I can use that, or I can use or something else is true, or local less than 100 and another condition has to be true for this to be all true together. So it's just like an if statement in that sense, and that's how you begin a while loop. But there are more than one. There's more than one type of loop for Ruby and a lot of programming languages in general, actually. So we have the while loop here, but we can also use a for loop. And to be honest with you, I don't find much use for loops and while loops aside from using arrays, so I'm going to use an array for the example. So I'm going to make an array here. I'm just going to call it list. And in list, I'm going to have, let's go with 0, 20, 500, text. Then we can do a float. We can go 1.754, and then we can go the vaguest version of pi, and then we can go true and false. Okay, and now what we can do is we can go for element in list message box underscore p element. Alright, and this is what happens when you use a for loop this way. For element in list, this is what it does. It basically puts list here and then it iterates through it. So when you go for element in list, it then goes element here, and then it prints out the element, which would be 0, and then it goes on to the next one. So 20 equals 20 now. Print out 20, and then 500, and then text, and then that, and then that, and then that, and then that. Okay, so we'll play it, and we'll see that happen. 0, 20, 500, text, 1.754, pi, true, then false. And that's a for loop. And you can use that to iterate through your entire array, because when you make editable regions for scripts, I tend to use arrays a lot, so that way the user can pass in as much information as they want into the array itself. So my code is more dynamic that way, as in I have a Battle Voices script that I made, and I use arrays for this, so you can put in as many battle voices as you want. So you can have 1,000 different battle voices for your actor swinging an axe if you wanted to, and that has to use an array, so that way I don't have to keep tabs on everything inside of it. So that's why I use for loops and arrays, because it helps my scripts have more information in it for the user. Okay, so that's how you use a for loop and a while loop. There are a couple of other loops out there that you can use, but these are the two best ones in my opinion. The other ones aren't quite as straightforward to use, and to be honest, I don't really see many other scripters use them either, so you don't really need to know it. Alright, so for loop iterates through arrays, and while loops can be used conditionally. Alright, so for loop uses for loops for arrays. So this is a for loop. Use for loops for arrays, and use while loops for conditions. So while 1 is less than 50, which means this will run forever. I don't really want that. Let's do a paradox. No, let's not do that. Okay. While temp 50, while temp is less than 100, then temp plus equals 1. Okay, so use while loop for conditions. Use while loops for conditions. Okay, so for loops for arrays and while loops for conditions. And what I mean by conditions is, you know, booleans and stuff like that that you want to create and have something equal a proper number. Or you can even use while loops for collision detection if you want to do pixel stuff. Okay, another thing to use while loops for is for animation. So for example, when we have the title screen and it pops up and it does that opening sort of thing, or from the center of the screen it starts opening wider and it does it really quickly, that's using a while loop. So while loops for animation and conditionings and all that kind of stuff, and use for loops for arrays. And pretty soon we'll hop into getting arrays for user editing and all that kind of stuff. So until then, just know that you can use while loops and for loops for these things. Okay?